Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. I'm glad to have you back for another episode. My day started this morning at, first of all, I get up pretty early, but the first communication I had with a client this morning was at 5:30. Now, please don't just everybody call me at 5:30 in the morning, but it made me think about something. Now, interestingly enough, he's one of the most successful clients I work with, and he sent me a text. He said, well, you know, something about the early morning club. And we spoke this morning. Interesting. I was on the treadmill and he had just got done working out and we were having this conversation and he made a statement that I thought was really powerful in the moment. He said, there's not that many of us. Isn't that true? There's not that many of us. And I started thinking about it for a minute and then it reminded me of this conversation I had with my son yesterday. And it's, you know, for me, I'm always talking about wealth and personal development and growth. It's almost like an addiction to me. And so it's always trying about getting better. And so it's funny, I started speaking and my son like followed in my sentence and started like, because he's heard it over and over again. But mindset, like if you're listening, like if you've read Financial Evolution and you've read Dental Wealth and you've listened to my podcast and you know that like I can give you all the information in the world, but if your mindset isn't right, it doesn't really matter. I am being completely honest with you. And interestingly enough, this gentleman came out of COVID and he's just doing crazy numbers and that doesn't surprise me. You know, he's that type of person, right? And we were talking this morning, interestingly enough, it wasn't like a problem. We were talking about just different things about growth and development. He was asking me my opinion on a few different things. Because remember, one of the things I'm always telling you is to invest in yourself. And he was looking at some investments that I had recommended. And not investments I do like stock market investments. But the most important investment you can have, which is yourself. Isn't it funny he's so successful? Isn't it funny he'd be up at 5:30 in the morning? Already worked out, by the way, at 5:30. Isn't it funny we'd have a conversation that before most of the people listening to this podcast even woke up, we had a conversation about personal development, growth, investing in yourself. And this is before the average person even wakes. We'd both worked out and talked about investments in ourselves before the sun came up. Isn't that cool? And it got me thinking, we were talking about, my son and I, the conversation is we were talking about mindset and how it plays into it. And I've talked about COVID before, but COVID was a great example, by the way. It was a giant mirror to me and should have been to you and to everybody else, because it was a check on your mindset. My biggest frustration, I think one of the greatest things I felt coming out of COVID, I said, I never let it take my mind. I never let fear take over. I never woke up scared. I went to action. I went to work with my team. My team, we worked twice as hard during COVID. My advice to clients was to get out there and market, communicate with the marketplace. Everyone else stopped talking. You need to talk more. You need to over communicate. When everyone pulls back, you expand. That was my advice. Well, the vast majority of people were pulling back and they were stopping and they weren't committing. Because the reason I can give that advice is because mindset becomes so powerful, and so many people, the last human sovereignty is your mind. And people gave up their mind. Did you? And by the way, it's okay if you did to some degree. I mean, I don't think you've got to be like, no, I did not, or yes, I did. I think it's just hey, did I allow someone else to control me? And I'll tell you, by the way, one of the reasons why I didn't give in to, now I'm not saying COVID's not real, and I'm not saying it's not a threat, and I'm not saying those things. What I'm saying is you still allow how much something impacts your mind. And I'm going to pull this into wealth in a moment, but this idea of whether we let it control our minds. I remember the day that I knew that the media was heavily into propaganda and to sensationalism and to tactics. And I had known it before. For instance, I went to the Middle East and met a beautiful people. I mean, some of the most amazing people. And in our society, we don't speak so highly, as we should, because I think there's amazing. I think, our country sometimes do a disservice to people around the world because there's some amazing people that you might never get the opportunity to meet if you let our media control that. But the day that I knew that the media was just completely sensationalizing things was honestly another epidemic or pandemic. It was Ebola. And I remember watching Ebola. And guys, I'm going to be honest with you. When all the Ebola stuff came out, I think I was a little scared. I think I caught into the hype. And Ebola is going to come over and it's going to take over. And it's, and it was all over the news and it was everywhere. And literally, and I forget what news cycle changed to make it go away. I forget. I truly do. I don't remember what it was. But overnight, Ebola disappeared. Now, Ebola did not disappear. It was not eradicated overnight. It's just the news decided to stop talking about it. And so everyone else did too. And I remember that thought, like it caught me so big. And I thought, my gosh, did anyone see that? Did anyone pay attention to just what happened? And then it makes me think, like, how often do we let people control our mind? And how often do we give up the last human sovereignty, which is your mind? How often do we do that? And by the way, that might be friends. We allow them to encroach on that. We let our family encroach on that. We let our peers encroach on that. I said to my son last night, I said, wait, like, think about this for a minute. I said, look, everyone thinks doctors are rich. Some are, some aren't. There's like everybody else. Some are struggling and barely making payroll, and some of them are abundant. But it has nothing to do with being a doctor. Your income might be higher, and you guys, look, doctors, you know that, right? Some doctors are thriving. Some doctors are not, just like everybody else. But I think what's most important is to understand is this. Now, so hopefully you're a follower of mine and you didn't get caught into the COVID trap. And like I said, I'm not saying we don't take things seriously. I take driving down the street seriously, but I still drive down the street. I flew helicopters. And so someone said to me one time, they were like, are you scared to fly a helicopter? Eric, that's got to be pretty scary to fly a helicopter. And I said, no, it's not. You know what's scary? Driving to the airport. Driving to the airport scary, not actually being in the helicopter. And so, like, we understand we have to take precautions in life, but we also need to understand that we allow people to control our minds and our mindset. And when it comes to wealth, people do the exact same thing. Now, you got to understand that you're listening to a person who has spent thousands and thousands of meeting. Like, I've got more case studies than you can imagine. Like, I tell people, like, I can talk to someone in 5 minutes and know their net worth. And people have tested me on this, and I'm dead on every time. And the reason I can guess your net worth by talking to you within a few minutes is because I know that everything affects everything else, and I can listen to the words that are coming out of your mind, and I know what limits you have. And what are your limits? Every single one of you. It's funny. I'll tell you a story, Tower leadership story. So one day I was looking at these multiple projects simultaneously. And this goes to show how we put parameters on things. So I was talking to my team and I said, look, I want to do these few projects. And my team, there was a team member who pushed back on me and just said, hey, look, Eric, that's a lot to take on at one time. We can't handle all that. And my response was this. Elon Musk is building the most valuable car company in the world at the same time as he's trying to put someone on Mars. But we can't handle another project? Oh. See, isn't that interesting? Isn't that a limitation? There was a limitation. And now when I put that in context, you go, oh, Well, hell, we're not trying to put someone on Mars. I mean, you're talking about a secondary project of trying to put someone on Mars. And by the way, as recording this last week, SpaceX, rocket went up into, International Space Station. It was cool sitting there with my son and watching the first manned mission from U.S. soil in about a decade. How cool was that? And to watch private industry get involved. And so, once again, that's mindset. When I compared the two, it was easy to see, no, we just created a limitation that wasn't even true. It wasn't even there. How many times do people do that with their own success and wealth? Now, one of the things I say all the time is people want to see you do well, but just not better than them. And so we surround people that confirm the story we've told ourselves. We limit ourselves, and then we find people to confirm our limitations. If you're, I said to my son yesterday, and I stand by this statement, as long as you have intelligence, I mean, look, I don't mean disrespectfully. Some people don't have the aptitude or the ability. There is a limitation. I mean, but you don't have to be a true rocket scientist. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to be a billionaire. But you can't be a billionaire if you have limits on yourself, not mentally. And I'm not saying you need to be a billionaire, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to be a billionaire. I'm certainly not saying that. But why not? I don't know. It just depends on what you want. Because there's a limitation that you write down. And so I always say this to people, and I say it to you listening to this right now. I know for a fact the car you think you deserve to drive, or that you think you can afford to drive, because it's the car you're driving. And the house. And by the way, some people want different things. I'm not, by the way, this is not a judgment on what people want. People want different things, but I am telling you that if you came to me and said, this is the car I want to, I'm going to drive this car, I could show you how to get it. But you'll go back to your 5 friends and explain why that car doesn't make sense and why you shouldn't be able to afford it and why economically and Dave Ramsey said and all this other things you'll find to enforce your story. And I'm not saying this is a dental wealth podcast, so we're talking about wealth here. So it's not, and by the way, money's not the end all and be all. It's not the only thing to measure when it comes to wealth. I mean, you can be rich and unhappy, and I think being happier is better than being having a lot of accumulation. But I do think you got to understand this, that our mindset, and this is one thing that if I could just get through to you, our mindset controls our trajectory. Write that down. Our mindset controls our trajectory. It's not the other factors. We use the other factors to justify our failures. We use them as excuses. It's Trump's fault. It's the Democrats' fault. It's my parents' fault. It's the Delta Dental's fault. And it's this fault. And it's that fault. I'm short. I'm tall. I'm white. I'm black. I'm female. Look, the truth is that people are controlled by their mindset. There are limitations, but you can overcome those limitations. And so the truth is we allow things to hold us back because mentally we allow those things to hold us back. And I believe that the truth is the trajectory is really what's in people's minds, what they believe that they deserve to have, what they believe that they can accomplish. Because if you change that, if you change what you believe, like Elon Musk, I mean, that's a great example. Ask him what he thinks he can accomplish. By the way, his compensation package, I just saw this, his compensation package is $55 billion. $55 billion if he hits these certain metrics. Is it possible to get paid $55 billion? And the answer is of course. But you got to first believe right? If Jeff Bezos, when he created Amazon, do you think that and by the way, he was in like, I think I still remember the story of him saying his proudest day was the day that he was on, the ground packing books and he got his first packing table, right? We can't imagine that now, but he had to know then what his limitations are. If he had started that and thought, well, I'll just create this company and hopefully I'll pay rent. No, if you know Jeff Bezos' background, Jeff Bezos comes from a very strong background, and he knew where he was going the whole time. His mind said, I'm going to go create. Right? Now, I don't know if he said at the time one of the largest companies on earth, but maybe he did. There was once a guy who said, I'm going to create $1 billion dental practice. And he did. And so when it comes to wealth, I can teach you every tactic possible. I can teach you where to put money. I can teach you how to invest money. I can teach you how to save money. I can teach you how to accumulate. I can tell you how to impact every single person around you. I can tell you how to pay off your house in no time. I can tell you all of these things. Like, I can do that. But everyone has a story. And if you tell yourself the story that you can't do it, if you tell yourself a story, the reason that you can't do it. Now, I'm not saying you don't have adversity, and I'm not saying things don't get in your way, because they do. But it's the perseverance. It's overcoming that. That's the secret sauce. Is believing it. The story you tell yourself, yes, this might be my limitation, but I'm not going to let that stop me. I know I'm going to be blank. I know I'm going to create this. I'm going to wake up early. That's why we're part of the early morning club. Are you? I get after it early. I wake up early. I'm at the gym. I'm paying a trainer. I do what I need to do. I'm up doing things. Now, I might walk in the office at 9 o'clock, but I'm up really early. Because I'm investing in me, and I'm investing in my mindset. By the way, congratulations listening to this podcast, because that means you're investing in your mindset. The other thousands of people can't be bothered, and that's why they're going to blame everything else for their problems. But I want to tell you this. I want you to do an exercise as we finish this podcast, and just an exercise for you. I want you to write down what you think you can achieve. How big do you think your practice can get? Write it down. What car do you think you should be able to drive? Now, you might not be a car person, by the way. I am. I love cars. I like to go to the track. I love, but look, hey, write it down. How much impact would you like to have on this world? How much impact do you believe you can have? I just saw Marcus Lemonis yesterday say, I'm going to cut a check for $1 million to any Chicago neighborhood mayor. Just tell me. How much impact do you want to have? Or do you believe you can have? And write it down. Don't just put a lot. Write it down. What's the house that I was just down in Palm Beach like 2 weeks ago, and everyone has these houses. That might not be yours. I'm not going to lie, but you see that house in the water, you might think differently. But write it down. What's the house that you believe you deserve to have? And then question it. Why? Why do you believe that's it? What's stopping you? What's holding you back? What limitation are you putting on yourself? Because everyone's told themselves a story. Everyone. I've told myself a story. You've told yourself a story. We've all told ourselves a story. And the sad part is most people have bought someone else's story. And I tell you, you don't need $1 billion. You need a better story. And if you learn to craft a better story and question, why is that my story? Why don't I can do more? Why do I believe that that's all I can do? The people who believe a better story end up having one. Guys, I appreciate you listening. Hope you've enjoyed. See you next time.